He's right behind me, isn't he?
He's right behind me, isn't he?
He's right behind me, isn't he?
Like there's a ghost right behind me, isn't there?
That one joke. I bet almost everyone watching this video has heard at least some variation of it. The right behind me joke seems to be ubiquitous in popular culture, from cartoons to TV shows to multi-million-dollar movies.
They're behind me, aren't they?
Sometimes it's he, sometimes it's she, but the punchline is always the same. It is so commonplace that even making fun of the joke has become a joke in and of itself.
Oh, is she behind me?
No, I'm in front of you.
The question I want to ask today is why? Why has this corny joke become so popular? In recent years, it has become a classic example of what the internet has dubbed Marvel humor. You know, that type of humor that is commonly featured in Disney movies and has been criticized as overly simple and cliché. The type of comedy people love to hate.
That's fine now!
I think to best understand the Marvel humor phenomena, we need to go back to its origins. Where did jokes like this even come from? For educational purposes, let us take a deep dive into the right behind me joke. As stated in the intro, it has been featured in all kinds of movies and TV shows over the years, but clever people on the internet have traced this specific joke and its distinctive setup and wording to a single source. Possibly the first instance of the right behind me joke appeared in the 1991 American Western comedy City Slickers, a movie that I think many, myself included, have never heard of.
He's behind me, isn't he?
There it is, the earliest version of the joke using a close approximation of the familiar phrasing. It dates back to the early 90s. People apparently watched the movie and I guess liked it so much that it exploded in popularity in the late 90s and early 2000s. But if we ignore the exact wording and are more lenient with our definition of the joke, it appears to be much older. I would argue that at its core, the exact phrasing is really irrelevant. The joke basically follows a simple structure. Character A is talking bad about character B, perhaps airing a grievance or saying something insulting that they would never actually say to character B's face. But then, they feel something behind them and oh no, it's character B, and they overheard the whole thing.
Start pounding, Joker!
If we follow this logic, the Tom and Jerry episode Fit to be Tied, for example, has a wordless version of the joke, long before City Slickers invented the iconic phrasing. Around this time, the author behind the Chronicles of Narnia, C.S. Lewis, wrote a scene in his novel, The Horse and His Boy, that goes like this. Why, and here Bree began to laugh, if he was a lion, he'd have 4 paws and a tail and whiskers. Ah, ooh! For just as he said the word whiskers, one of Aslan's had actually tickled his ear. Bree shot away like an arrow to the other side of the enclosure, and there turned. The wall was too high for him to jump, and he could fly no further. It is essentially a print version of the right behind me joke. And similar comedic scenes are evident in English literature going as far back as the 19th century. 100 years before C.S. Lewis, there was the novel North and South, which had a passage that goes like this. I am sorry I asked you to go to Mr. Thornton's. I am disappointed in him. There was a slight noise behind her. Both she and Nicholas turned round at the same moment, and there stood Mr. Thornton with a look of displeased surprise on his face. Obeying her swift impulse, Margaret passed out before him, saying not a word, only bowing low to hide the sudden paleness that she had felt had come over her face. But it gets even better. I have reason to believe that the joke is ancient, older than the English language and the Roman Empire, going back thousands of years. After months of research, literally, I'm not joking here, I think I was personally able to discover the oldest version of the right behind me joke in recorded history. Are you ready? Here it is. Okay, so there's this ancient Greek stage play called The Frogs by the Athenian playwright Aristophanes. It dates back to 405 BC and follows the humorous adventures of the bumbling god of wine, Dionysus, and his sassy slave or manservant, Xanthias. The humor can be really blunt and vulgar at times, but if anything, I think some of the jokes aged really well. There is a scene towards the beginning of the play where Dionysus and Xanthias have entered the underworld of Hades. a world ruled by lost souls and grotesque monsters. It's pretty spooky. Xanthias urges caution.
I think we better hurry on, Master. This is where Heracles said all those horrible monsters are.
Ah, the wag. He spun yarns to frighten me, but I am a brave fellow and he is jealous of me. Ah, I wish I might meet some monster so as to distinguish myself by some deed of daring worth my daring journey.
Ah, hark! I hear a noise. By Zeus, a gigantic monster
Where?
behind you. Oh, what a monster! I can see. Dreadful. Terrible. It's I don't know. It's one of those that are everything, all at once. It's a bull, now a mule. Ah, now a woman. Oh, what a cutie.
Then it is the Mpusa, the shape changer.
It must be. Just look at her face. It's a huge ball of fire.
Ah, can you see if she has a leg of bronze?
Sure does. Hang on. Another is made of. By Poseidon, it's made of cow poop. Yep. Cow plop.
Oh, where can I hide? Who can I run to? There you have it. The oldest right behind me in human history. At least in recorded human history. Found by yours truly. Yeah, it was like complete luck. It was like the first Greek play I opened and read. I'll admit, I'm being a bit generous here, but the joke is not much different than many modern examples of right behind me. Dionysus talks big and brave, asking for a monster he can fight like his strong brother Heracles, only for his slave Xanthias to point out that one is waiting for him, right behind him. Now, it is actually debated by scholars if the monster Mpusa really was behind Dionysus or not in the play. The terrified Dionysus never actually sees her, and Xanthias just says she disappears a few seconds later. Fun fact, in the more vulgar translations of the play, Dionysus even shits himself out of fear. Most likely, the mischievous Xanthias was only pretending to see her to mess with his cowardly master. It would definitely save a lot of money for the play's prop department. But the basic joke is still there, over 2,000 years ago. Transcending time and culture, people have found this particular comedic setup funny, regardless if it was performed in a Greek theater, read in an antebellum era book, or played on a movie theater projector in 2022. It might not be laugh out loud funny, but we still get it and recognize it as a piece of humor. But why, though? Well, we've gone this far. Let's overanalyze the joke. The anatomy of a joke. I will argue that the right behind me joke archetype is so enduring for several reasons. Firstly, as stated before, it has a very simple structure. The joke has 3 players, character A, character B, and then the audience. Character A is speaking to the audience about character B, typically in a negative or insulting light. A usually acting arrogantly or gossipy. There is also usually an essential power imbalance between character A and character B. One is more powerful than the other, or has power over the other, either physically or socially. This is where the versatility of the formula comes in. Character B can be any number of people to character A. They can be their boss, or their lover, or their parent, a big tough guy, or a monster. In general, they are a person that character A, under normal circumstances, wouldn't want to hear the words they're saying. The teller can easily trade them out depending on the situation. We, as the audience, see character B, but A does not. We know that something bad is about to happen because of this. The humor comes from watching character A's reaction. The shock, surprise, and then panic. Probably what makes it so enduring is the fact the situation is so relatable. The joke is about a universal human experience. We have all said something at an inappropriate time, and most of us know that specific emotion that happens: shock, fear, and embarrassment. Right behind me appeals to our inherent two-facedness, people's willingness to act one way around some people and act a completely different way around others. Us humans are social animals. We will act brave or overconfident to impress people even when we are really cowardly. We will compliment people we hate and secretly criticize them when we get home. We will hold back our true, unfiltered opinions from people we value or fear. And crucially, we want to avoid being caught doing this type of behavior at all times. If someone ever found out what we really thought of them, it could ruin some of our relationships. The boss could fire you, or the tough guy could beat you up, or the love interest could decide to break up with you. And I think a significant part of the humor in the Right Behind Me joke comes from it happening to someone else for once. When we see it, we think to ourselves, "Oh, thank goodness that's not me." In all honesty, it's not a bad joke. Although very simple, RBM, yes, I'm going to give it an acronym, is something almost everyone can understand and relate with, regardless of time period or what culture they come from. Everybody's two-faced to some degree, and that's why it works so well. But this poses an interesting question. What other jokes are seemingly timeless? Has humanity's sense of humor remained relatively the same, or changed throughout time? Do jokes in the past land just as well in the present? Well, for the most part, I'd say yes to both those questions. Some general senses of humor appear to be universal and cross-cultural. The sense of humor of an ancient Roman would probably not be too different to that of a modern person. With maybe one caveat. Anyone who has read the Satyricon or Pompeii graffiti, for example, can tell you that ancient Roman humor was pretty vulgar and brash by the standards of today. They often treated issues and situations we would consider sensitive incredibly lightly, in a way that comes off as kind of cruel by our modern standards. We've gone too woke, I guess. It is also possible that these examples reflect ancient, edgy humor rather than the norm. In any case, we would probably have more in common with each other than not. People in the past were so much more like us than we often give them credit. Right Behind Me is by no means alone. It is not unheard of for our modern jokes and comedic setups to have ancient origins. In fact, many jokes appear to have been shamelessly recycled for at least as long as humans knew how to write them down. The ancient world is filled with examples of comedy that are eerily similar to stuff we have in the modern day. The parents are out of town. The teenage son decides to throw a party at their house while mom and dad are away. They're having a good time and making a huge mess of the place, but then, oh shit, the parents are back home from their trip early. We gotta hide everything quick. Classic setup of a comedy movie or TV show from like the 1980s. But what if I told you that this is the plot of a Roman play dated to 193 BC? What? Mostellaria, or The Haunted House by Plautus, follows this exact same outline, almost to a T. I think everybody appreciates a good fart joke every now and then, and if you don't, you're lying. The Guinness Book of World Records claims that the oldest surviving joke in the world goes something like this. Something which has never occurred since time immemorial, a young woman did not fart in her husband's lap. A couple years ago, news outlets reported that this was the oldest joke ever made. But is it though? I was initially skeptical of this claim as it was often given without a direct source, but after some sleuthing I was able to find that the joke is in fact authentic. It was recorded on some old Babylonian clay tablets dating to the 18th century BC, originally recovered from the ancient city of Nibiru. The tablets are Old Babylonian, but likely record older oral traditions. Now, I will say it is debatable if it is a joke. Some Sumerian scholars I have contacted about it have explained that ancient proverbs like these are best understood as humorous riddles, stories, and mantras, not necessarily jokes in the modern sense of the word. Additionally, we also have plenty of similar proverbs dating back to this time period and existing in the same collection. Seth Richardson, the managing editor of the Journal of Near Eastern Studies, explained to me that in order to claim the fart joke as the world's oldest joke, you would need to set aside a small host of third millennium texts which are likewise not jokes per se. One such example he examined was a cryptic Sumerian riddle. One has opened the well, the other two look on. Answer? A flaccid penis and testicles. What? Now, rendering the riddle from its original ancient language kinda removes the punchline, but Seth posits that in the original language the riddle worked as a play on words. Quoting his paper, he states, "We may face nothing more complicated than a 4,000-year-old schoolboy Boffa-D's nuts joke." That's right. Boffa-D's nuts is really ancient. People have always had this. Another Old Babylonian wisdom tablet appears to contain the oldest surviving Yo Mama joke. The tablet consists of somewhat silly question-answer riddles, written by a somewhat careless and sloppy hand, which has led some scholars to speculate that they were composed by a young student. A translation of one such riddle goes like this: "In your mouth, in your teeth, constantly stared at you, the measuring vessel of your lord. Answer? Beer." You can kind of get the idea. Further down this same tablet, we find this unfortunately fragmentary riddle. "Of your mother? Is by the one who has intercourse with her. Who is it? Answer." Like I said, the section of the tablet on which this particular riddle was recorded is damaged, so we are literally missing the punchline, and maybe a part of the setup as well. To add insult to injury, the tablet itself appears to be missing. After initially being examined by archaeologists in the 1970s, it became lost. Nothing is known to us about its present whereabouts and physical shape. That's right, the world's oldest Yo Mama joke is currently missing. Somebody call up Indiana Jones. In any case, each one of these wisdom tablets could be considered equal rivals for the world's oldest joke. Lastly, I just had to include this one because, well, I just had to. It seems like people have always liked jokes about big, body parts. For example, a 16th century historian was able to record this likely far more ancient oral story told amongst the Nahuatl-speaking Mesoamericans. In the story, the last king of the Toltecs, Huemac, said to Nonohualca, "You are to give me women. I order that the buttocks be 4 spans wide." The Nonohualca said to him, "So be it. Let us seek where we can get one whose buttocks are 4 spans wide." Then they brought 4 women, but as to the size, they were not enough. He said to the Nonohualca, "They are not of the size I want. Their butts are not 4 spans wide. I want them really big." The Nonohualca left in great anger. Funny enough, the Romans also did something similar with a different body part. The poet Martial wrote that if you heard a round of applause from the bats, it was caused by the sight of a huge Some things never change. Old jokes that got old. To contrast these apparently timeless jokes, we have jokes surviving from the ancient world that haven't really stood the test of time. It is not because they are fragmentary or damaged in any way. In many instances we have the full text of the joke. Rather, there is just something missing, not with them, but with us. We don't get these jokes because they require extra context, additional information to be properly understood. Knowing the words is not enough. There is another layer of cultural information necessary for comprehending the humor in them. And the necessary information was apparently so commonplace in the past or in another culture that there was no need to include it within the joke itself. The easiest to understand examples of this phenomena are puns and pop culture references. People have always loved puns. Every culture throughout human history has created jokes of the way words within a language sound. Such as this knee slapper from 1914. "I shall be a gay grass widower for the next 2 months. Wife's gone on a holiday to the West Indies." "Jamaica?" "No, it was her own idea." That's so stupid. Even the Bible has puns. The Epistle to Philemon contains one of the New Testament's few explicit jokes. The Apostle Paul wrote the book as a letter to the slave-owning Christian Philemon. Delivering the letter was Philemon's runaway slave Onesimus, who had tried to escape his master but had been caught and temporarily placed in prison alongside Paul, who during that time had managed to convert him to Christianity. In Philemon 1:11, Paul writes, "I appeal to you for my son Onesimus. Formerly he was useless to you, but now he has become useful both to you and to me." Now, the modern English translation of the text completely misses Paul's sense of humor here. Firstly, the Greek words for useless, akhristos, and useful, Euchristos, rhyme. But that's not all. The name of the slave, anasimos, also means useful or beneficial in ancient Greek. So in the original language, Paul is making both a pun and a clever use of wordplay. A more literal translation should be something like this. Useful was useless to you, but now useful is useful to both of us. Haha! Slavery jokes! Anyways, puns are likely one of the most common jokes to humanity, but they, alongside pop culture references, are also the easiest to age poorly. To fully understand a pun, the listener must be familiar with not just its language of origin, but in some cases the regional accent of that language as well. A non-English speaker would completely miss the 1914 Jamaica joke. In the same way modern translations of Paul's epistle make his snide comment invisible, it is the sounds of the words within the original language that provides the humor. A translation simply won't do. On another level, jokes that consist primarily of references or allusions to popular culture, such as celebrities, well-known stories, or current events, often fall flat on those unfamiliar. Even today, translators struggle to convey jokes not just across language barriers, but cultural ones as well. Oftentimes, footnotes and citations are needed to further explain the cultural context of a certain joke. English readers of the manga JoJo's Bizarre Adventure have consistently been confused by the content of Steel Ball Run Chapter 63, 7 Days in a Week. The chapter consists of a gag that is utterly incomprehensible to someone outside of Japan. The problem is that it makes reference to both a Russian folk song, 1 Week, well known in the country, as well as the routine of a famous Japanese comedian. There really is no way to get the joke without that context, even if you understand Japanese as a language. You not only need to know Japanese, but also these two pieces of external media. We see a similar problem in the past. Shakespearean and ancient Greek plays commonly make humorous references to stories and then current events, for which modern audiences are now unfamiliar with. Consequently, modern editions include an army of footnotes explaining them. But there is also an even deeper and more abstract example of this phenomena. In recent years, one of the most infamous jokes of the ancient world is what has become known as the Sumerian dog bar joke. Initially discovered on 2 different old Babylonian clay tablets in the ancient city of Nibiru, it is dated to roughly around the same time as the fart, D's nuts, and yo mama joke proverbs we talked about earlier. Watch this, I'ma read it in the original Sumerian. Urgire heshtamshe inkuma ingname ignamundo ninkal takaneneshte. A translation of the text goes something like this. A dog entered a tavern and said, "I can't see a thing, I'll open this one." Or alternatively, the dog, having entered an inn, did not see anything. "Shall I open this?" That's it. Do you get it? Well, like I said, these kinds of statements on wisdom tablets are better understood as funny proverbs rather than jokes, according to Sumerian experts. But nonetheless, there is just something missing here. Like, what does this even mean? Scholars and nerds on the internet have repeatedly attempted to understand the meaning of the proverb and explain the joke with, I think, varying degrees of satisfaction. Harvard's Edmund Gordon provided the first translation of the joke into English in 1958. His interpretation was that since we know that inns or taverns also served as brothels in Sumerian culture, the dog wanted to see what was going on behind closed doors. It's a dirty joke about a dog walking in on, something. However, other scholars have since disagreed. Assyriologist Sarina Nett and Dr. Philip Jones at the Penn Museum, among others, gave really great interviews with Endless Thread, link in description. Sarina provided several possible explanations. It might be a pop culture reference that has become lost, like something a famous king once said and the joke writer is trying to parody. It could also be that the dog walks into the bar with his eyes closed, and when he sees nothing and says, "I'll open this one," he's referring to opening his own eyes. Dr. Philip Jones further explained that the Sumerian word for dog used in the text is actually ambiguous. It might not even be a joke about a dog. The word was used to describe both dogs and big cats among the Sumerians. It could easily be a lion walks into a bar, we just don't know. Several competing explanations of the dog bar joke might work. or might not. We have no way of knowing which is the right one. The real answer must have been so obvious to a person of that time and place that no explanation was required. There's this comic strip called Nancy, created by Ernie Bushmiller, that was popular in the US in the mid-1900s, less than 100 years ago. A strip was published in the newspaper on March 18, 1950, and goes like this. Got my shoes mixed up in the movies. Okay, what does this mean? Well, the answer is that I guess people in the 1950s regularly took off their shoes in the movie theater, and Nancy got hers mixed up with somebody else's. It's weird and falls completely flat on a modern audience that does not share the same cultural experience as a 1950s one. What is happening with Nancy is likely a lot like what happened to the Sumerian dog bar joke. Both are jokes probably about aspects of everyday life that have simply been forgotten as societies have gradually changed and evolved over the generations. In order to truly understand these types of jokes, we would have to live the life of an ancient Sumerian, or a moviegoer in the 1950s. We would have to absorb the everyday experiences of a person from that era. It is not easy. For example, the only reason we know that ancient Romans likely treated cuts and scrapes with olive oil and spiderwebs is based entirely on an offhand comment in a surviving Roman adventure novel. The Romans never wrote such trivial information down by itself. Perhaps that is what is happening with the bar joke. We are just missing some cultural context for a probably mundane experience. In a way, it is like watching a Family Guy cutaway gag with 0 reference points. It sounds rambling and insane to an outsider. The everyday context that explained Nancy's movie theater joke is already fading. The everyday context that explained the Sumerian dog bar joke is already long gone. And here's the thing, for all we know, these poorly understood ancient jokes might not have been good jokes in the first place. Maybe they were only mildly amusing, or not even funny within their original cultural context, and this is why we struggle to understand them so much. Like hell, imagine trying to explain to someone 3,000 years in the future what the joke is in the Garfield pipe strip. Or when Brian says, "Ass ahoy." Cow tools, the creepy smiling Simpsons meme. I don't doubt that some modern jokes might be overanalyzed for centuries to come in the same way as the dog bar joke, as future cultures struggle to find what was funny about them, when in reality, they were just kind of stupid and you weren't actually supposed to think about them that deeply in the first place. How to make a joke that lasts centuries. Now, to wrap this up, what makes a good joke? Historically and anthropologically speaking, that is. As we have seen, some jokes age like fine wine, while others age like spoiled milk. The shifting of cultural memory and the widening of language barriers have caused many jokes to fall flat. Here are some guidelines that I made from my research on how to avoid creating a dated joke. Number 1. Keep it simple. Overcomplicating a joke can make it more likely to be misunderstood. The longer a joke is in a written form, the greater chance it has of becoming fragmentary. Number 2. Make it require as little context as possible. Cultural context can be lost rather quickly, so it's best to avoid things like pop cultural references or current trends, as these will be lost on a future audience. Number 3. No puns. You want your joke to transcend language barriers. Not too many people are, though I admit some will, learn how to speak a dead language just to get your stupid wordplay. Just avoid the puns, alright? And lastly, number 4, make it about a pretty universal and relatable experience. History has shown that the most enduring jokes are about something nearly everyone has in common and can relate to. Dionysus talking shit, or Huemak's obsession with big butts, or farts, are something a lot of people, regardless of place and time, can identify with. Look, the man just likes big butts. Narrowing yourself to experiences specific to your time period, social class, or culture restricts your audience. Someone might get it, but you are unnecessarily restricting your humor to a small target audience. People are gonna hate me, but from what I have found, Marvel humor is the way to go. It isn't that bad per se. As we have discussed, Marvel humor is simplistic, You can, or at least you're supposed to find it funny without much context or, thought. And I think this is intentional. Marvel movies, Star Wars, and other pieces of popular media are designed by giant studios like Disney to appeal to as wide an audience as possible, to make as much money as possible. Disney doesn't want to restrict their movies' audiences to just Americans. They want everybody else too. As a result, jokes in these movies must make sense to audiences all over the world, regardless of language barriers, cultural reference points, and social norms. The content of the joke must be pretty much universally understandable. And this universality of certain types of humor is what keeps some of the same jokes recycled over millennia. This is why the RBM joke will get a laugh or a chuckle both in a crowded theater in Athens, Greece, and an empty theater in Athens, Wisconsin. So the next time your stupid ass friend complains about these jokes being lame, just remember, wait, he's right behind me, isn't he? Oh shit!